To do something like this in someone's new house, the sense of immorality is crazy, huh? The sound of a young woman's giggling can be heard just on the other side of the door. My husband is laughing along with her, as if in agreement. The room in our new house that was supposed to become our bedroom. On the other side of this door, my husband and a stranger woman were intertwined. Come on, don't you feel a bit sorry for your wife? Not at all. I had decided from the start it would definitely be with you. The way the woman speaks of immorality while not feeling a shred of remorse. And my husband's voice, too, can be heard laughing lightly in response. Hearing that, I'm painfully aware that my husband has no feelings for me at all. I can't believe it, and I don't want to believe it, but I find myself breathing heavily at the sight I never wanted to see. The development was unthinkable just a short while ago when I was floating on air about our newly completed house. The arrangement of the bed, the color of the bedding, the design of the indirect lighting that would also serve as decor. We were supposed to create a room where the couple could fully relax after a day's fatigue. All the money we had saved up over many years for this purpose had nearly run out, but it seemed like nothing compared to the anticipation of a new life. But now, it's all crumbling down before my eyes. I'm literally holding my head, shocked enough to pass out. What should I do now? Should I storm in right away and confront the two of them? Should I capture the scene on video? Even if I did go in, what if the two of them resorted to violence? I hesitate, fearing for my safety. But then, just recording and suing for damages, it's doubtful they'd pay up properly. As I'm pondering what to do, my eyes catch a glimpse of a long stick at the edge of my vision. It's a tension rod we bought for earthquake preparedness. Looking at it, which I had prepared to set up between the ceiling and the shelf once we finished unpacking, a slight smile forms on my lips. That's it, I'll just lock them in. My name is Harper. I work for a foreign company, 29 years old, and met Kai, my 32-year-old husband, when we went to take care of some official paperwork. We don't have children. I'm living a decent life now, but I grew up poor. Raised in an apartment with crumbling exterior walls and shared toilets and baths, having bread only once every 2 days was good, and I remember being hungry every day. It was too embarrassing to invite friends over even as a child. My parents worked tirelessly, sparing no time for sleep, but our living situation never improved, and a family vacation was an impossible dream. Some say all you need is love, but without money, you can't do anything. My parents, who were supposed to have married for love, were always arguing about money. Perhaps that served as a sort of elite education for me, as my dream for the future was always a life where I wouldn't have to worry about money. Fortunately, I was good at studying, so I managed to go to a college for language studies on a scholarship and acquired as many useful certifications as I could. Thanks to that, I was able to land a job at a high-paying foreign company, and a few years ago, I finally managed to move my parents out of that dilapidated apartment. My next dream became to build a brand new home. I wanted to live in a new home with the person who would become my family someday. Looking at my bank account every month became my pleasure, filled with that hope. I met Kai, a government employee, when I went to the office to submit some company documents. After going back and forth several times due to changes in the forms and making corrections, we gradually became aware of each other and married. It was just when we were discussing building our long-dreamed-of new home that Kai came to me, apologizing that he might end up burdened with a huge debt. When I pressed him about what was going on, he said he'd been coaxed by his best friend into becoming a co-signer for a new business venture. Unfortunately, it didn't go well, and the business went under. Fortunately, his friend didn't run away and was scrambling to repay the debt, but a debt restructuring was imminent. That meant claims would soon be coming to Kai, the co-signer. I feel terrible for Harper, but he's been my best friend since we were kids, and I want to help him out. Kai said with a pale face. I asked my apologetic husband. How much is needed? You can use my savings. Looking up at me with a dumbfounded expression, I smiled at him. Money can be earned again. But lost friends don't come back. Growing up poor, I had built walls around myself and never made any friends I could call best friends. That's why Kai's desire to help his best friend struck a chord in my heart. I nodded to my husband, who looked up at me, asking if it was really okay. We're a couple, after all. Thank you for consulting with me. Later, just as Kai had said, a huge debt claim came through, totaling about $300,000, combining my savings for our new dream home and what he had saved. Somehow, we managed to repay it. Thank you, really, thank you, Harper. It's okay, that's nothing. I responded, though I was disappointed that our dream home was now further away. I didn't want Kai to feel even more guilty, so I laughed it off. And so, I started working frantically again, taking on overtime to save up for our home. But as I started coming home late from working so hard, I noticed that Kai's behavior began to change. I realized it when we finally started to accumulate enough for a down payment on our home and began considering purchasing it. When we were discussing how to handle the home payments, we had previously talked about splitting the cost, but Kai's savings were almost gone due to the debt, and he had also lent money to his friend, leaving him with nothing saved for our home. Could you make the payments from your account for now? You're earning more than me, so it should be fine, right? He said, with a tone that felt a bit prickly. My childhood experiences with financial scarcity made me numb to this discomfort. Indeed, paying from my account was the quickest solution, and I hated to see Kai get upset every time we discussed home financing, so I agreed to make the payments. I remember feeling a chill when Kai's eyes didn't seem to smile when he said thank you. I shook my head, telling myself it was just my imagination, and proceeded with the arrangements. However, just as our new home was about to be completed, Kai started insisting that the house be put in his name. I was confused by his serious request. After all, I had made almost all the payments for our home, and Kai had contributed only a little money. It was hard to say no after agreeing to help his important friend, and it seemed like he had no intention of not paying at all, so I couldn't be too firm. But it's quite another thing to be asked to put the house in his name when I've paid for most of it. What are you talking about all of a sudden? In the end, your loan application didn't go through, and I'm the one taking out the mortgage, right? It's not like you can just ask me to hand over the title. Kai shrugged helplessly as if he was truly troubled. Come on, I'm paying the living expenses, right? I saw somewhere that the monthly mortgage amount is about the same as living expenses. So, it's almost like I'm paying the mortgage, right? Plus, you earn more than me, so it makes sense for the person who earns more to pay. He argued confidently, seemingly unaware of how absurd his claim was. The living expenses Kai bragged about paying were little more than the groceries. Since he had exhausted his savings and most of his salary went to supporting his friend, he never paid for utilities from his account. What he referred to probably included rent and other living expenses. Did he not realize, working at the office, that the few $1,000s he contributed each month were nowhere near the monthly mortgage payments? He seemed to forget that he was living a life entirely dependent on me, yet convinced himself that he was paying just as much. That's right, I'm the one paying. It's not so simple to just change the title. Besides, it shouldn't matter whose name it's in, we're married. I sighed, wishing he'd understand. But Kai looked at me pleadingly. Don't say stuff like that, please, Harper. For my pride as a man, I wanted it to seem like I built this. When I asked him why, it turns out he had bragged to his in-laws that he was the one who paid for the house. Why did you tell such a lie? I pressed him, my tone slightly harsh, and Kai looked visibly irritated. What, you don't want to support your husband? There's no way I could say I had my younger wife pay for the house. This isn't about whether or not I want to support him. What I want to know is why he felt the need to put on such a pretense. There's no need to specify who paid for what, really. I retorted, feeling quite irritated myself. I understand having pride, but that doesn't justify lying. Besides, there's no need to explicitly say who made the house payments. Especially since Kai has hardly paid any of them. To be honest, even agreeing to put both our names on it was a concession on my part. Don't get so mad. I'll pay my share eventually, just change the title to my name first. He said, trying to calm me down and putting his arm around my shoulder, which I gently shook off and stood up from the worn sofa. I had no intention of changing the title, and Kai was still pressing the issue. This discussion was going nowhere. I sighed and forcefully ended the conversation. The day of the final handover of our new home arrived. Despite Kai badgering me daily to change the title, I remained firm in my refusal. His persistent attitude started to make me suspect something was off. But I couldn't pinpoint what it was as the day approached. Due to work commitments, I had asked Kai to attend the handover of our new home, but I managed to finish earlier than expected and got permission from my boss to leave early when I explained it was the day we were getting our house. My boss readily agreed when I explained it was the day we were getting our new house handed over. Despite my reservations about Kai's behavior, I was excited at the prospect of finally getting our dream home. By the time I got there, the handover must have been completed. Having visited during construction, the completion brought a whole new level of sentimentality. I arrived at our unfamiliar home, my heart buoyant with anticipation. The door was unlocked. As I opened it quietly, I saw Kai's shoes and a pair of women's pumps. Maybe he was still getting some explanations? Curious, I entered the living room and saw Kai's bag and a shopping bag tossed on the floor. "Kai?" I called out, but there was no answer. Thinking it odd, I left the living room and headed towards the back where we planned to make the bedroom, hearing voices that seemed like conversation. Just as I was about to open the door, thinking they were in there, I stopped dead in my tracks. "No, Kai!" a woman's voice exclaimed, clearly not discussing the house. The loud voices, unreserved in the privacy of a detached home, leaked through the door gap. Shocked and incredulous, I peeked through the gap to see my husband with another woman, unmistakably intimate. What was happening? My mind went blank. This was supposed to be our dream home. Yet, why was my husband with another woman? Amidst my confusion, the woman's pitiful cries snapped me back to reality. Upon closer inspection, Kai was dressed in anime character cosplay, and the woman was wearing nothing but a pink apron with frills. What is this? I felt a surge of disgust. I recalled Kai mentioning he had been part of a cosplay club in college. Although he hadn't cosplayed frequently since becoming a working adult, he still attended such events with his former club mates as a hobby. I hadn't objected to his hobby, thinking it was a good escape from his rigid workplace, but this was different if it involved infidelity. Engaging in acts while cosplaying, were they seeking some sort of escapism? Anger bubbled up inside me, and I clenched my fists. Unforgivable. There was no way I could let this slide. My dreams, our marriage, everything felt tainted. Driven by anger, I took some covert photos with my phone using an app that didn't make a shutter sound, then gently closed the door gap. I pondered how to retaliate against this betrayal. "That's it, I'll lock them in." Muttering to myself, I quietly left the house to put my plan into action. I rushed to a nearby hardware store to buy a tension rod and carefully set it up at the sliding door, the only entrance to the room, making sure not to make any noise. This would prevent them from easily leaving. The room had windows, but their original clothes were in a shopping bag thrown in the living room, so they likely couldn't change and escape through the window. I had effectively created a makeshift locked room and reached for my smartphone. It was a great opportunity for a new house reveal. Why not expose them in their disgraceful state to all our relatives? Why not let them see those two locked up in such a disgraceful state? I contacted my parents, in-laws, and all our relatives to invite them for an impromptu housewarming. Despite the sudden invitation, those living nearby happily agreed. About 2 hours later, everyone had gathered in front of our new home. As I received compliments on the nice house we had built, tears started to well up in my eyes. Yes, it was a nice house. A home we had saved diligently for, our dream home. Now marred by such an incident, something I had never imagined. My sudden tears caused a stir among the relatives. With gritted teeth, I apologized deeply. "Thank you all for coming today on such short notice. However, I must apologize to you. I began, raising my face without wiping away the tears, and divulged everything that was happening in the house. The truth is, my husband Kai is cheating on me in this house. I explained how it was the day of the handover. How I had come home early from work to find him with an unknown woman in what was supposed to be our bedroom. And how even after 2 hours, they were still engaged in their act.
Is that true, Harper?
The relatives, initially unsettled, fell silent at the anguished voice of my father-in-law. My father-in-law, pale and shaking my shoulder, got a nod from me in confirmation.
So, Kai is inside the house, Harper?
My father, fueled with anger, announced before barging into the house with a force that seemed like he was about to break down the door. The other relatives followed suit, storming in. Amidst the crowded relatives, the two caught in the act seemed to finally realize something was amiss. They panicked when they found the door blocked by the tension rod, unable to open it.
What the heck? Why won't it open? Why are there so many voices? Is someone there?
As I remove the tension rod, the sliding door bursts open with a sound. Kai, dumbfounded by the sudden opening of the door, and the woman clinging to him in nothing but an apron, are surrounded by relatives blocking their escape.
Dad! Uncle too! What? Why are you all here?
Kai, eyes spinning in shock, instinctively hides the woman behind him.
Kai, what on earth is this about? Who is that woman?
My in-laws expressed their anger, their fury almost palpable. The relatives began to rebuke Kai and the woman one after another.
We thought we were coming to celebrate, and what is this mess? In such a ridiculous get-up, what were you doing?
Kai began to tremble and stammer out excuses as accusations rained down on him.
No, this is just cosplay. She's a junior from my college club, here to celebrate. Yeah, a celebration. Hey, wait, Kai.
Panicked, or perhaps in a bid for self-preservation, Kai pushes the barely clothed woman forward. Despite instinctively protecting her moments before, now, perhaps valuing his own skin more, he hides behind her.
Come on, Mila, you came to celebrate, right? Right.
Pushed forcefully by Kai, Mila, now identified, scrambles to cover up the situation.
I'm Mila. We were just cosplaying to commemorate the new house,
she says with a forced smile, almost in desperation.
That's not true at all. Stop lying.
Snapped by my mother-in-law, Mila flinches. And the room falls silent. Kai's parents have always been strict. Kai was more nervous than I was when we went to greet them for marriage. They detest dishonesty and are the kind to extend a helping hand quietly to those in need. I thought Kai shared their integrity for standing by his friend in need. But it seems I was mistaken. Overwhelmed by the collective intensity, Kai and Mila crumple to the floor.
This is an unbelievable betrayal, Kai.
My father says, and with that, Kai finally looks down, unable to meet his gaze. We move everyone to the living room, and I make Mila put on her clothes. She snatches the bag I hand her and glares at me.
You've really done it now.
But her glare doesn't faze me. The infidelity of a cheating woman doesn't hurt. While the women shield her from the men's view as she changes, the atmosphere is chilly.
Ah, what a hassle. I was only with him for the money he'd give me.
Mila grumbles, still complaining in this situation, then throws her apron on the floor after changing.
There, I'm changed.
Her arrogance infuriates one of my aunts.
After all this, don't you think you should show some remorse?
I couldn't help but raise my voice, to which Mila sneered.
Humph, you're Kai's wife, right? It's because you couldn't satisfy him that he cheated. You should be thanking me, the princess of the club, for taking care of him.
Her words, sneered with her hair tossed back, boiled my blood. It took all my willpower not to lash out physically. Indeed, Mila, being the princess of the cosplay circle, had a pretty face and an impressive figure. But her insides were of a vile woman. Was it her who ruined everything for me?
Daring to lay your hands on someone else's husband, don't joke around.
If someone hadn't held me back, I might have struck her. Calm down, they said, but calm was the last thing I felt. When Mila was made to sit next to Kai, being rebuked by the men, I pulled out something from the corner of the room where they had been and took it from my suit pocket.
What's that?
Kai, unable to even straighten his disheveled wig, asked fearfully. Mila looked away disinterestedly. What I had was a small recorder. To avoid disputes over said and unsaid things in business dealings, I always carried it in my suit. When locking Kai and Mila away, I had sneakily left the recorder in the room to catch indisputable evidence. Checking it earlier, I discovered not just the affair but a dreadful plot recorded.
Is this for real?
As I pressed the playback button on the recorder, Kai's face drained of color upon realizing it contained their conversation. Their voices began to spill out from the recorder with a static hiss.
To think Harper still believes that debt story.
Such a fool.
The bankrupt friend, right? Amazing you managed to hide that $300,000.
Their mocking laughter filled the silent room. The conversation, unhindered by any furniture, was disturbingly clear.
The company collapse was real. But I never co-signed. Just faked some documents and showed her a forged demand letter. She totally fell for it.
Kai, you're so cunning. Working at the city hall pays off. Hearing his own voice sound so pleased, Kai visibly panicked. The relatives began to stir as they listened to the clear evidence of a crime.
To satisfy the princess of the club, I had to do this much. You liked that brand bag I got you last time, right?
Hee hee, thanks as always, Kai. Exposed to the relatives' stern looks while the audio contradicted their frightened faces, Kai started to tremble. I stopped the recorder as it began to replay their resumed activities. The taste of blood tinged my bitten lip. Holding back tears, I glared at Kai and Mila. Learning that the loan I believed was to help a friend was actually squandered on this woman darkened my world. The money I worked tirelessly to save for our dream home vanished into Mila's pocket. That was unbelievable enough, but they also planned to change the house's title to Kai's name, divorce me, and take everything. His insistence on changing the title was not about pride, it was sheer greed. I believed in you. Overwhelmed by sorrow, I covered my face. Tears leaked through my fingers. I believed in a husband who said he wanted to help his friend, who smiled and agreed to work together towards our dream of a home. Yet, listening to that recording, I had to confront the reality that the man I married was gone, and yet, somewhere deep inside, did I still hold on to hope? Seeing Kai's expression, I felt despair anew. Speechless, Kai froze as one of the relatives, having heard the recording, broke the silence.
This is fraud. It's malicious, we should call this woman's parents too. Ha! Fraud. I just took the money he offered. My parents have nothing to do with this.
Panicked, Mila attempts to stand up, but we forcefully get her parents' contact from her and call them over. Surprisingly, her parents live in the neighboring town and quickly rush over in a panic after hearing what happened. Initially surprised and confused by the number of people, they immediately rush to Mila upon spotting her.
What is this? What are you all doing? Mila, what have you done to be accused of fraud?
An uncle briefly explains to the man who introduced himself as Mila's father and plays the recording. Initially incredulous that his daughter could do such a thing, Mila's father becomes speechless as the playback continues.
Mila, what have you done?
Shocked, her parents look on as Mila hastily denies the allegations.
Wait a minute, I only took the money because Kai said he'd give it to me. This isn't fraud. Be quiet.
Snapped by her father, Mila falls silent. Making Mila apologize, her father deeply apologized to me as well.
We deeply apologize for our daughter's grave misconduct,
he says, as Mila continues to protest. And Kai's parents follow suit.
Please, you can raise your heads,
I say, and they hesitantly look up at me. An apology from her parents won't heal the wounds inflicted on me.
First, I will be seeking a divorce from Kai,
I say, causing Kai's shoulders to flinch. His pained expression, as if he were the victim, only infuriates me more.
Additionally, I will demand repayment of the debt I covered within a year, and from both of you, I will demand compensation for damages.
Pulling out a notebook from my bag, I add the word compensation to the amount I had covered and present it, causing Kai and Mila to tremble.
Paying within a year? That's impossible. I won't accept any excuses.
I cut off Kai's attempt to argue, glaring at him. I wish they could pay back immediately.
Furthermore, I will require you to buy this house. A house tarnished by such acts is unlivable.
As I speak through gritted teeth, Kai and Mila start to object, claiming it's impossible.
Such an amount, there's no way we can pay.
The debt I covered, some compensation. And the purchase of the new house would cost them millions. Even selling this house wouldn't cover the debt. But I have no intention of reducing the amount. Impossible, please reconsider. As Kai and Mila plead, the frustrated relatives start to get angry.
All of this wouldn't have happened if you two hadn't done what you did. Just pay up gracefully.
Bombarded with accusations, the two shut their mouths, frustrated.
I could also report this as fraud to the police.
The moment I mentioned the possibility of fraud, realizing they couldn't escape their fate, Kai and Mila both hung their heads in defeat. After that, Mila was abandoned by her own family and ended up working in the nightlife to repay her debts. Her parents made sure she was under surveillance to ensure the repayment, but by the time she finished paying off her debt, she had become completely engrossed in the nightclub scene. She created more debts and continued to work in the night streets. Unable to break the cycle and ignoring her parents' pleas, she eventually severed ties with them, as I heard through the grapevine. As for Kai, it seems he was eager to escape his financial woes. He borrowed more money from shady lenders to repay me, but without any savings, he couldn't keep up with the repayments. Eventually, debt collectors showed up at his respectable workplace, forcing him to resign voluntarily. After leaving his job at the city hall, with no means to repay his growing debts, he's now reportedly being forced into labor in a distant land. A crumpled letter forwarded to me contained words wishing for reconciliation and a brief update on his situation. As the doorbell rang, I immediately threw that piece of paper into the trash and opened the unfamiliar front door to welcome my parents. The returned money, the sale of that detestable house, and the compensation paid allowed me to acquire my dream home once again. A dream home for me and my parents. I plan to live happily with them for a while.